I wanted to acknowledge some special guests that are among us this evening. I know we have in the room Bruce Arstead, the Minnesota Consulate Force. And Bruce, thank you for joining us tonight. I know he's coming. I've seen him. Jonathan Weinhagen is going to be joining us, the president of the Minneapolis Chamber. Matthew Woodley, the director of the U.S. Commercial Service. Beth Richardson, the Consul General of Canada. Lawrence Rezitar, the director of International Business Strategy at the state of Minnesota. And of course, Tom Hansen, earlier. And Tom should give you the full title, Diplomat in Residence at the Allworth Institute for International Affairs at the University of Minnesota Duluth, an impossible business card. I also want to take a note and just say we have some wonderful people in the room that have been very helpful to me. I'm 1 year into my role here at Global Minnesota, and we have some great folks that have been helpful to me, the folks that you might want to meet, particularly if you're interested in the countries that they represent. We have many of our honorary consulate members with us this evening. And I'm going to kind of just walk through. Maybe they can give a wave too. People might want to come talk to you about your country that you represent. So Elaine Kubala is here representing Finland. So Elaine, great to have you with us. Marek Kusera, where's Marek at? Marek represents the Czech Republic. It's great to have Marek with us. Ron Leonhardt is here representing Japan, which is wonderful. So he's our honorary consul for Japan. John Freibolz is here from Latvia. Where's John? John Freibolz. Fawad Mahawaj, how do I do? Mahawaj. Again, all right, representing Lebanon. So great to have you with us tonight, Fawad. Jan Bauer from the United Kingdom and also a local Minnesota board member. Rick Ardekani is with us from Norway, representing Norway, and Christina Carlton from the executive director of the Norway House. So we have some wonderful folks that have joined us for the program tonight. If you want to seek one of them out and learn more about what they do in their role as honorary consuls, please do so. So thanks to a great team of moderators, presenters, and panelists who've come together. You're going to meet those folks in just a moment. We have a great team we've assembled for you tonight. I want to say thanks to our Global Minnesota Corporate Membership Committee, especially Jonathan Orr and Tana Moore and Donovan Walsh, our co-chairs for our corporate committee. Our staff, Katie Kelly and Steve Riedel in particular, for the work they've done to help put together the program tonight. And our Global Minnesota board members, and a few of our Global Minnesota board members in the room, raise your hand, board members for Global Minnesota. We have you guys here tonight too, and be very helpful in putting our program together. We get a chance to connect with all these folks. We're going to have a very interesting opportunity for networking at the end of the program today. John will explain a little bit more about that later, but there'll be a chance for you to meet many of these same folks during that time. And also during the networking time, please visit the tables outside this room with offerings from your fellow corporate members as well as our partner organizations. So today we are gathered here to discuss megatrends, global shifts that change our society and the way we do business. They are powerful disruptive forces that shape our personal and business lives and the socioeconomic norms of tomorrow. We're looking forward to a truly great conversation. I want to thank you again for joining us tonight. And I want to now invite forward Marlene Lopez Ibarra. She's the Strategy Director of County Governance and Emerging Markets for 3M, a Global Minnesota board member. And she's going to welcome us to 3M today. Marlene, please come forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and officially welcome to 3M. It is always an honor to feel the energy when we have a room filled of people. When you come in, no matter what the day it is, and no matter the time it is, and you hear the bienvenidos, welcome, benvenuti, and hopefully you heard it as you were coming into the building. And I can say that as a 22-year 3Mer, every time I go through the 3M Innovation Center tour, I still get goosebumps. And the reason for that is when I see Global Minnesota connect and Forum engage, the first word that I see is connect. And when I see this story of 3M, for those of you that went through the tour, it's about the way that 3M has been able to connect those 51 technologies. And I always say, if 51 technologies can create 50,000 products, imagine the power of probably close to 100 different minds from different parts of the world with different experiences, and just being able to be all in the same room, being able to connect Minnesota to all these different opportunities, engaging to all these different opportunities. So for us, it's an honor to put these people in this room, to have the opportunity to have John back at 3M. This is your house and will always be your house. So a double honor to have John having this the first year here, and hopefully many years hosting this event. And with that, we'll continue with the event, and we would like to invite Tana Moore to continue the event, she is a Global Minnesota board member and chair of our corporate membership committee. She was CEO of Veritas, a global alliance of legal law firms prior to retirement. And with that, thank you very much, Pat. Welcome to the stage. Thank you. And what a wonderful place to be and see all the innovation of 3M. It's just amazing to me. It's my pleasure to introduce John Penor, our keynote speaker, and our conversation starter, Lori McDougall. I just want to give him a few words. You have plenty of background in your materials there. But John, for 34 years at 3M, he brings a rich background in analyzing trends, applying those trends to business and government strategies, and building bridges between business and foreign governments. Today, he leads a consulting practice called Government Analytica, where he works with businesses and their advisors to communicate their public value to foreign governments and their representatives, with the goal of increasing the strengths of those relationships. Most recently, he was a speaker at the World Affairs Council of America meeting. It was held in Washington, D.C. It's the organization of which Global Minnesota is one of the affiliates across the country. His topic was equitable and just global energy transition. Gives you an idea of some of the things that he does. In the past few years, I've had the opportunity to work with John as on behalf of Global Minnesota, and I have never ceased to be amazed at his political and cultural literacy, some of which you will hear about today. Lori McDougall, a fellow Global Minnesota board member, will facilitate our panel conversation as a follow-up to John's presentation. And keep your questions, write them down, because they'll be more than willing to answer them. Lori had a 30-year career at United Health Group, serving in multiple roles in the development and operations of healthcare services, focusing on international development, health informatics, and public and private partnerships. So curiously, she was one of the first 100 employees of United Health Group and was there for 30 years. And it's, it's amazing that there were only 100 employees of this organization that has grown to be such a leader in our community. She has a long and deep interest in international and global activities, starting out with her degree from Thunderbird School of Global Management in Arizona. So, with that, I will welcome John.
Okay, well, thank you so much. I hope I don't disappoint you with some of the accolades that was mentioned about me. I am delighted to be here to speak to you about megatrends. One of the things I want to talk about is that there are many great folks here that have their own international experience that can certainly have their finger on the pulse of activities in the world as events unfold. My goal tonight is to try to connect some of these dots for you and try to create a framework as to how you see world events that at times seem chaotic, they seem painful, and how you bring about a degree of structure and predictability so that you can design your activities, your programs, your corporate strategies around that. And when is the right time to jump in? And when is it too early? I think the analogy of surfing is quite appropriate. When you throw your surfboard in the water, if the wave is too shallow, you can possibly stand on it and the surfboard is going to go down. You need a certain amount of momentum before you're able to surf that wave. And I think trying to figure out which megatrends are durable, have longevity behind them, and are enduring, so that you can develop strategies that last 5, 10, 20 years is part of the alphabet of trying to figure out how to do this kind of work. With that, I want to just briefly talk about the word megatrends. Megatrends was coined by John Nesbitt in a book with the same name. And one of the things I like about one of the statements in the book is that megatrends are very much like forces. If they're all going in the same direction, it's easy to figure out that there's a mega trend that you're facing. The challenge is when signals are weak and signals are in different parts of the world and not a chorus of voices or a chorus of evidence that you can see, it is those early phases that makes the practitioners of strategic planning, megatrend analysis, etc., people that are really important to focus on. In my shop, in my business, we focus on public value, but to be able to figure that out, we track a lot of data on a regular basis. We're a sort of a vacuum cleaner of information. And that analysis, used to do that here at 3M for the portfolios we had here. These public domain sources are really good at trying to help us figure out what it is that's coming, when it's coming, and when the signal is strong enough for us to be able to put our oars in the water, our surfboard in the water, and try to move forward. There is a report that those who are attending the event today can download. You have a QR code for the report here, and there will be access to this at the tables as well. While you're using your phone and scanning this, I'm going to tell you a story. I think the story would make sense when we talk about megatrends. It's 2004. It's winter. It's cold. I'm in Beijing, China, and we are there to speak with the China Centers for Disease Control. The reason we're there was that China is coming out of SARS. SARS, for those of you who may not know, is a severe respiratory illness that originated in Southeast Asia. And they're interested in understanding what they can do to be able to prevent that from happening again. Now, hindsight is 2020, of course, but in 2004, what I was presenting to them was basically a model that predicted outbreaks, and based on the intensity of outbreak, it predicted what the intensity of consumption of products and services are going to be. For those who do analytics, these kinds of things are very simple things to do, and but for them, it seemed very exotic. The Centers for Disease Control presentation was in a room, maybe a quarter of the size here. There were a number of people that seemed very studious because as I spoke, everybody was scribbling down what was being said. And when the meeting was over, during the course of the meeting, of course, I ran a simulation when in real time it was showing an outbreak, numbers were moving, things were moving on the screen, and it showed a dynamic view of what's happening. When the meeting was over, a young gentleman approached me and asked if we could visit the Ministry of Health that afternoon, which was an unusual invitation. Of course, we said yes. My colleagues are all from 3M China, and of course, they participated. And when we arrived at the ministry, to our surprise, we were at the great reception hall for foreign visitors at the ministry. The Office of International Cooperation at the ministry usually organizes these kinds of events. And we had, and I was speaking to the head of emergency management for the country. I'm speaking about this because at that time, I don't think I could have predicted 20 years later, our lives would be governed not only by COVID, but also by the consequences of that in terms of how we have to make our supply chains more resilient and what are the consequences to business as we go forward. So small events that have a long shot action and repercussions are really important. And I think part of the challenge and the artsy part of trying to figure this out is trying to pick up those early signals and then track them to see when they become strong enough to engage and decide on corporate strategy. The 12 megatrends that I speak about really fall into 5 different categories. Globalization and market access is one cluster. There are a number of them having to do with industrial policy and supply chains. We hear that word quite a bit. We are affected by absence of products shortage of products, and that's a supply chain issue. It impacts our public policy domestically and our foreign policy internationally. And of course, demographics and movement of people around the world have a big effect on the outcome. So I want to make sure you see it in larger buckets before seeing a dozen or so items on the list. The list is here. I'm not going to go through the list. You can get a copy of the report and read it. But for tonight, I'm going to focus on 4 things that I think are quite important, especially as we look into 2024. I think as we were envisioning the global business outlook, one of the things I really wanted to get across was that there is some measure of predictability looking 12 or 15 months ahead. For many companies, that's their operating plan. And then they have a vision of where they are 3, 5, 9 years down the road. And of course, that crystal ball becomes very cloudy. As you can imagine, many of the things we're facing today, we could not have predicted 3, 5, or 9 years back. However, I'm going to focus only on these 4 megatrends. I will go through them, but they have to do with globalization and they have to do with industrial policy and supply chains, because our government, other governments are heavily investing in these areas. And our companies in Minnesota, our companies in the United States are watching very carefully to see how the industrial balance is going to change because of these investments, because of regulations. Governments really do 2 things very well. They regulate and they take our taxes and redistribute it in some way. And investments of these kinds is a form of investing in what they believe is the strength, the stronger parts of our economy. The first one I want to focus on is megatrend number 1. It's where your globalization's country put a premium on access to their markets. No doubt the trade disputes that we hear about in the news is part of this larger topic. There are a large number of people that are going to become the consumer class in countries that were underdeveloped. They're now developing, and this consumer class needs goods and services, and generally companies in the United States, in other countries, are suppliers of these goods and services, and we're all competing for these folks, for these individuals. Globalization now has got a bad connotation because of much of what has been happening recently. But if you look at the span of time, the 66 years between the end of World War II and 1916, the size of the US economy increased by about $2.1 trillion. And every year, per person, that means $7,000 more per person entered the economy. While jobs were lost during that period, for every 200,000 jobs that was lost, 100,000 jobs was gained. And so if you have a long view, you can see transitions like this. And who knows, with artificial intelligence, we may be on the verge of yet another wave of transition. What we have to do, the difference between those who lost jobs and those who were employed because of the changes, are the people we have to sort of help, retrain, and bring back into the workforce. And that's part of the equity that we talk about, plain and simple. However, we don't have this degree of foresight to know what happens a year from now, 5 or 10 years from now. The G20, the top 20 industrialized nations in the world, are a dominant force. And for Minnesota, for the United States, those markets are crucial and important. They have 85% of the global GDP. Those 20 countries, the other 180 plus countries have the other 15%. So you can see how lopsided the equation is. The share of international trade is about 75% amongst those 20. And they have 2/3 of the world's population. So to understand what goes on in the world means we have to understand what goes on in these 20 countries. We're one of the 20. We have to become politically and technically culturally more literate about the other 19 and beyond. I have the report from Minnesota Trade Office as to what the top countries and what the level of exports were from Minnesota to those countries. And as you can see, many of those account are part of the G20. So the trend is even important for us here in Minnesota. We can't escape those types of trends. Between 2020 and 2030, so 6 more years, January 1 is almost upon us here. In that decade, these are the number of people, in millions of people, that are going to enter the rank of middle class in those countries. And as you can see, this is the group that's driving consumption, and that's why these countries are becoming a top target for many businesses as they develop their strategy. So an entry of these individuals into the rank of the middle class requires market access if we are to provide products and services from the United States. One way to minimize barriers to trade is to make sure you and the other trading country do not have tariffs that stop trade between the two countries. Free trade agreements are the way we build reciprocity between countries, and flow of goods and services can happen with some degree of ease. And as you can see, many countries are active, in fact, hyperactive about building these free trade agreements. Free trade agreements used to have a certain design to them in years past. Now, the nature of free trade agreements are actually changing. But as you can see, free trade or barrier trade, tariff-free trade is something that countries are looking for. Now, you just don't remove your tariffs. You want to make sure they offer their workers the same degree of worker protections than we do. That may be why our costs higher. So you have to try to figure out in free trade agreements how you create balance and reciprocity between the two groups. I have some questions for reflection here after every megatrend. And for this one, the question is, how will this impact your industry? Or the public sector? Remember, we have to, government regulates, and we use those regulations, and under the banner of those regulations, under that umbrella, we are actually moving forward with our business plans. Which aspects of these megatrends are crucial to your organizations that you have to plan for? We will hear from 3 talented individuals that do this for their companies shortly in the panel. And how do you integrate these insights into your strategy? Is the signal weak right now, and you have to wait a year or 2 before you know it's the right time to engage? These are critical questions that has to be answered from a strategy perspective. I'm going to switch over to another megatrend, number 6. And in the report that you will be downloading, one of the things you will see is that for each megatrend, I talk about what governments are doing. What is the effect on the economy? What's the effect on society, etc. Which each megatrend has consequences, not just for business, but for everybody that's participating and involved. But in this one, we see this now with greater strength here in the US and around the world. Environmental policy will drive an increasing share of the industrial policy and economy. So usually countries have some approach to what we call environmental policy. But when the demand gets to be high enough, consumers and end users are willing to provide a premium for products that have certain characteristics that make them desirable to purchase. And therefore, industrial policy, where you investing in renewable energy, investing in electric vehicles, etc., starts driving the economy rather than being just a policy discussion. It becomes a practical way of approaching things. And there are a few things I want to share with you. One of the, I think, misconceptions everyone has is that when environmental policy is ratcheted up, this is going to slow down business or affect it negatively. You can look at this selection of countries here. The blue area is the GDP of the country over a 30-year period. As you can see, it is going up as the red arrow, which is the amount of emissions they have, is going down. So you can have growth in your economy while you're reducing emissions. Now, the question is, are we reducing it fast enough, given the capacity of the planet to be able to respond? But growth in a country is not antithesis to good environmental regulation. This is proven now that we have a 30-year view. When you ask citizens of various countries what their views are on these kinds of issues, it's interesting to see that in many countries, whether they are more in favor of protecting the environment versus protecting the economy and creating growth and jobs, in many countries that are facing a great deal of pollution, what you see is that they're far more in favor of environmental measures because they see that every day. When they open the faucet, clean water is not coming out. There's pollution in the cities, etc. And so the consequences are felt immediately. And I'm delighted to have Lebanon here because they're not subject to this. That's a bonus actually. So, we are of course in the United States, we're very proud of Medical Alley, the collection of medtech and life sciences company here in Minnesota, of Silicon Valley, our technology hub in California. But climate tech is becoming an increasingly big part of investing. And this is the amount of venture capital money that is going into these things. When it's not your money and it's not government money, and somebody actually has to put their hand in their pocket and give somebody venture capital money, you know that there is a great deal of scrutiny as to whether these solutions have actually great consequences or not. Because people could be spending that money on a variety of different things and get different return on their investment. But obviously they think climate tech will have a good return going forward. This is probably a sobering view. I'm not too sure how we're going to approach this, but renewable energy and our capacity to be able to deliver battery power, especially, is really important. If you want to have a lot of electric cars on the road, you need to have 1,000 to 2,000 pounds of battery per car on the road. That means you will need several tens of pounds of lithium per car. That means you need to mine lithium, to collect it, to bring it to the United States, because we don't have active lithium mines in the US. This is the small battery is today's capacity of various countries to make lithium batteries, the kinds of stuff that goes into our gadgets, as well as what goes into our cars. 5 years from now, you can see China, for instance, is expected to produce 600% more batteries. It needs a lot of raw materials and other things to be able to do that. If we are to have resilient supply chains in our battery operations so that our big three and others are able to access this technology and make more electric cars, we need that. So the needs are not just for the end product, but for all the raw materials we need to be able to get there. Since we have Ecolab here, I put something about water because it's of critical importance. We take for granted the fact that we can turn our faucet on and be able to drink a glass of water without worrying about it. What you see is a selection of countries here where what percentage of the population has access to clean water that they can drink out of their tap. As you can see, most of the world doesn't have access to that. So environmental just doesn't mean energy, even though we're consumed by talking about renewable energy and other means of producing energy. But being sustainable also means having the basics: clean air, clean water. And the good news is that we have great Minnesota companies here that are able to offer that. And I would be remiss because we will have a representative from Cargill also on the panel to talk about agriculture. So I covered Lebanon, Depot Lab, and Cargill. And I think sustainable agriculture is one of those things that is becoming increasingly important. When you have 8 to 9 billion people in the next decade or two to feed, being able to take care of the land and do the agriculture in a manner that is sustainable becomes even more important. It needs inventions, it needs development, it needs education. It just doesn't happen magically. And so the capacity of our companies to educate and equip the rest of the world to do that is highly dependent on the capacity of people in those countries to be able to receive that knowledge and put it into practice. If the educated class, if the people that are doing the farming are unable to take that information and make it practical, then we're not able to affect the rest of the world in a positive way. And you will hear a conversation and dialogue about that here in the panel right after this. Again, the questions for environment and industrial policy is what is the impact to your industry? There is the kinds of rebates that are being offered, for instance, on the electric car. We probably increase the sale of electric cars. That means more has to be produced. More equipment manufacturers, component manufacturers have to be active. Many of those manufacturers are in Minnesota. In fact, 3M actively supports auto industry in providing a lot of products that go into the car. You see the manufacturer's logo on it, but when you open the hood, there's all sorts of folks, companies that are putting products in there. So impact is really important to gauge beyond the final product. In the last few minutes of my talk, to sort of steer in the crowd, I see a lot of steering here, because I think a lot of people are nodding and are still attentive about 19 minutes through my talk here. So I'm really pleased about that. Governments will invest in national economic sectors with a high global competitive advantage. You can be sure that in Germany, the German government is going to invest in the auto industry because it is 34% of the GDP of the country. So they want to make sure they're not going to fall behind anybody else. Government investments are a critical part of the equation at a global level. And up until recently, Western countries decided that market forces would naturally be able to bloom to the surface, the companies that are the best, the technologies that are the best, and they would find a way to market, and it would happen very organically. I think it's increasingly understood that state support is required because some of the investments are so astronomically large that no company has the deep enough bank account to be able to take that risk on its own. And so governments are actively investing in this area. Which governments? If you look at global patent activity, you may get a sense of who some of these folks are. This is the percentage of patents that are awarded in the world. 5 countries dominate most of the patents, and you can be sure their governments are supporting their companies to be able to get them. In the United States, we just passed last year the CHIPS Science Act, which has a great deal of funding in it to bring back, reshore companies back to the United States, but provide an incentive for companies to be back here. This is a way of, for the first time, with a dramatically large package as this is, the United States has started to actually do what other countries have been doing for decades. Now, if you're a company and you make your product, you sell them for a decent profit, you're able to reinvest that profit in your people and your organization and grow your business. An extra 52 billion injection into your market segment can radically change the balance of power in your market segment. So these kinds of investments are not, are really important to track. Because if you believe you have an opportunity to get some of this funding, you want to put yourself in the intercept path to be able to receive some of that funding and be the beneficiary. The state of Minnesota may want to put itself in the intercept path to be able to receive that. Important to note that dispensing this funding by and large has been given to U.S. Department of Commerce. And we have representatives for the Department of Commerce from the U.S. Export Assistance Center, et cetera, here actually in the room. So very important to mention that this is happening in the United States. Europe, soon after, within a few months, had their own package, and of course, other countries are investing significantly. You will see in the report, for instance, $450 billion over 10 years by Korea in Korean chip infrastructure. Chip making requires clean water, high conductance water, and so we have technology here that will be able to, for instance, assist in those areas. Now, as part of the CHIPS Act, we have been actually a beneficiary of it. Just a couple of weeks ago, it was announced that Minnesota and a cluster of organizations in Minnesota, including University of Minnesota, Mayo Clinic, Medtronic, all participated in becoming the recipient of being designated as a tech hub. This is the phrase as part of CHIPS Act that's being used for groups that will be given somewhere between $40 to $80 million by US government to invest in areas that they believe would have impact in a roster of activities and themes that US government has identified. Same questions apply. Does it impact your industry? Is it crucial to your organization? And when is the right time to step in and put an intercept tab to receive that funding and be the beneficiary of it? And I would be remiss if I don't talk about supply chains, because all of us have gone to the store where things are quite not there. We wait a while to receive products. Used car prices go up because there are not enough chips to make new cars, and so on and so forth. But governments have decided they will invest to diversify sources of supply. Now, before many governments began doing this after COVID, I would have bet my money that governments are the last people that know about supply chains. Most of you who are from companies understand fully what I say. Governments really don't understand supply chains. Yet, they have the regulatory power to influence that. For instance, they can say certain segments of the economy need to carry 10% more inventory. They can regulate that. And then that cost would be the initial cost of that. The cost would be passed on to the end users. But the power to regulate is really important. And now the power to invest through many of these legislation that's coming from Washington is increasing. Enhancing resilience of logistics and supply chain is a very important factor. If you ask companies, most of them are now going to dual sourcing, which means for every raw material, you want to make sure you have at least qualified 2 of them. We have a lot of medtech companies. When they qualify a raw material for a medical device, they have to use that raw material and can't just switch to another one unless they file with the FDA and get approvals all over again. And so this can be a costly and expensive piece for many companies. But it's important because production can't stop. Critical materials that have a long lead time, more of it may be kept in inventory. The nemesis of a just-in-time production and a just-in-time consumption system is a global pandemic. We have learned, and so these are hard lessons learned. I don't think if it wasn't for the existential crisis we had, we would not have known that there are so many gaps in our production and consumption systems. Reshoring, regionalizing supply chains so that your producer are closer to your factories. And reducing the number of products that are not selling, you can reduce the complexity of your business. Reducing SKUs has been around forever, but I think it's intensified in light of the shortages that we see. Now, I'm especially interested in the top 7 reasons why reshoring after the pandemic has become popular. As you can see, proximity to customers is always the #1 priority. You want to produce as close as you possibly can to people that consume your products. You don't have gaps in movement of goods and services. #2, government incentives, hence the CHIPS Act. It reduces the risk for businesses to bring everything back to where they're able to produce with greater certainty. You need a skilled workforce. When we have 3% unemployment in our state, factories that relocate here, how will they find those individuals that they have to hire to run those factories with such low unemployment? This is a challenge for our state, it's a challenge for our country. Certain things can be done probably with artificial intelligence, but a widget that requires somebody to delicately put it together because it's a medical device may not be one of them. Synergies and the image and brand of producing in Minnesota, producing made in USA, and other countries have the same fervor for making it in their own countries. This is not unique to the United States. Impact on domestic economy, and of course, infrastructure. I have to speak about infrastructure. As you saw from one of the charts I showed you, one of our destinations in the world, one of the biggest destinations in the world for our products from Minnesota and from the United States is Europe. But today, in Minnesota, we don't have direct air freight, regular air freight from Minnesota to Europe. We actually put all the products we want to ship to Europe on a truck, send it to Chicago, and then it gets palletized and goes by freighter to Europe. This is a gap in our state supply chain that we have to bridge. And of course, there are plans and there are regulations to look at state needs and be able to do that. But as you know, the wheels of government move slowly. I think groups like this or companies that have like-minded outcomes can increase their voices and amplify it. And we can talk about that a little bit more during the break, during networking session as well. I think this is the bar chart here is to me is interesting. Every 2 years, companies face disruptions that last between 1 to 2 weeks. And a 2 to 4 week disruption in supply chain happens about every 2.8 years. And if you have a 2 months or beyond disruption, that happens about every 5 years. Most of these numbers have actually gone down, meaning the disruptions are longer and tend to be more frequent. And I think this is what is the driving force behind resilience in supply chains. Resilient means you have various sources of raw materials, you're able to produce your products in many different locations, you have all means of transportation available to you to be able to get your products to the market effectively. Then you have a well-oiled, well-running system. Almost all countries, as these faded in, the first is the Resilient Supply Chain Plan for the Federal Republic of Germany. The second one is the logistics plan. Sorry, the first one is for UK. The second one is for Germany, Japan, China, and the United States. Every country is taking a serious look at their supply chains to see how they can improve it. If our businesses don't know what decisions they're making, getting products to those markets, manufacturing them in those markets, and taking the manufactured products and sending them to other countries could be a challenge for us. So I think this is one of those mega trends that's going to be going forward for a while. You cannot possibly rejigger the entire global supply chain in a matter of 1, 2, or 5 years, something that took 30 or 40 years to develop. With that, I wanna end my conversation here. The future that we talk about because of these mega trends is already here. It's not some distant future that we have to wait for it to arrive. The goal is to try to pick up the signals as fast as we possibly can to be able to get the message across and make decisions in our businesses that are good and effective for us. And with that, I'm gonna pass it on to Lori. But before doing that, I just wanted to mention that you can have we decided as part of this global business outlook that it would be an opportunity to have a conversation with me for the first 10 people that sign up. And so I just wanted to announce that, and with that, I mean, thank you for your attention.
Oh. Yeah. Very good. So, the corporations in Minnesota and across the country are worried about the mega trends that John was just talking about. They all work very hard to bring in executive level expertise to really look at the various strategies. These are the people that bring their hands, that spend sleepless nights worrying about mega trends, and wondering what their impact is going to be on their business. So we are really honored tonight to have 3 strategic experts from 3 of Minnesota's top and largest corporations, Ecolab, Medtronic, and Cargill, to share their insights on how they're thinking about megatrends. And I think most importantly, what I'm excited to hear about is really how do you take these big trends, these big kind of macro, big global movements and translate it and bring it into concrete strategies and actions that their companies can really use to adapt and pivot to meet the demands of the business environment. So we're really happy to have them here tonight. We're going to start with Cedric Gowrie from Cargill. Cedric is currently the global head of corporate strategy on Cargill's corporate strategy and development team. Cedric joined Cargill in 2018 as the corporate strategy director in Europe, the Middle East, and Africa regions before moving to Minnesota in 2022 in his current role. He provides strategic direction for the corporation and its portfolio and supports strategic projects for individual businesses across the country. Cedric holds an MBA from INSEAD, master's degree in general management from Solvay Business School, and graduated from the Belgian Royal Military Academy as a civil engineer. So Cedric, can you start us off by telling us a little bit about your work and how kind of these mega trends are affecting you?
Okay, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay, first I'd like to apologize for my strong French-Belgian accents and sometimes have to understand speak slowly. So yes, those big actions for us, we see those are as business opportunities, also as two big kind of tailwinds. I will call 2 mega trends in particular that John also discussed is you. So the first one is the more population growth for us. We see population growth, we see especially also the population wealth. The population is growing by 1% per year. The wealthy part of the population, the high income middle class that we see. So it's the population that is earning more than between 15 and 80,000 per household was 300 million people a few years ago. It's going to reach now 700 million people, and by 2030 we see 1.2 million. And for us, this trend is very, very important. Because at this kind of income, we don't go for the cheapest food ever. You go for something that is making you more healthy, and that is where you can live, I would say, longer and better lives. And that is a trend that we see. Also, at this kind of income level, often those people, this income level we see is 40 plus. It's people who are kind of also bit kind of poor. And it has a huge impact on our own portfolio. We see the strength of people going much more into natural projects. And we see a switch less people eating less beef, more and more chicken, and especially driven by sustainability, by several trends that I will come to. We see also a big rise in seafood. Seafood and chicken are emitting 5 to 6 times less CO2 than beef on one hand, and also on the other hand, I would say those are very healthy content. In terms of foods, we see also another kind of big trends is people, once they come to this kind of income level, they try to switch the calories coming from carbohydrates, sweeteners, or oils, or fats, and they try to have their calories also coming from proteins and also vegetable proteins. So we see this for us as a massive impact in all our portfolio, and also now we see the whole flow system of calories. So this is the first one, it's the population rates, and the second one is sustainability. So sustainability, I say, has an impact on the kind of proteins, vegetable proteins, seafood proteins. But we see this also as a huge impact for us because of opportunities, the whole bioenergy, biofuel. How can we have circular energy with oils? We're selling oils to McDonald's, we can recycle this oil and we're using again to make a biofuel. Much lower CO2. This is also one.
Thank you. Next, I'm pleased to introduce Dr. Brett Knapp from Medtronic. Brett's been at Medtronic for 100 years, serving in multiple levels of leadership with an emphasis on strategy and business development. He's currently serving as Vice President of Global Region Strategy, focused on growth in emerging markets and advancing the company's go-to-market strategies. Brett holds a BS in Chemical Engineering from the University of Wisconsin and MS in Aerospace Engineering, a PhD in Mechanical Engineering from Stanford University. So Brett, can you tell us about your work at Medtronic and a little bit about the trends?
Yeah, thank you. So at Medtronic, we have a global regions organization that is focused on emerging markets growth and serving our patients in emerging markets, as well as providing standardized services to our businesses and our patients around the world. So we will provide customer care and service repair in all markets. As you can see on the slide above, Medtronic has a pretty vast reach. We're the world's largest med tech company. We have operations in over 150 countries around the world. Those countries tend to have different market dynamics, different reimbursement systems, different patient needs, different levels of maturity. So we have to customize our strategy somewhat. But in so doing, we can bring the best of Medtronic to patients in the world. You can see we help out 74 million plus patients every year. So that's 2 patients per second that benefit from our technologies. So my job is to make sure that we are providing efficient support in developed markets like the US and Western Europe, but also to think about how we drive accelerated growth in emerging markets and get the most out of our portfolio of those emerging markets. And you asked about megatrends. The good news for medical device is that there hasn't been a true paradigm disruption in a long time. That the basis of competition is still innovation and customer intimacy, understanding therapy and market dynamics. So the traditional model still works fairly well. That said, there's been a number of inflection points in the last 10 years that have changed how we make trade-offs and how we differentiate from competition. 10 years ago, there was a shift in reimbursement paradigms in the US and elsewhere, with the Affordable Care Act and EDCI, and emphasis on risk sharing and gain sharing that led to a wave of value-based healthcare innovation that Medtronic and others participated in. More recently, we're seeing technology as somewhat of a disruptor, an evolving disruptor as you think about the increasing power and capabilities of micro devices, microelectronics, the interconnectivity and the rapidity with which data can be exchanged, the availability of edge computing is creating the opportunity to establish new data-oriented ecosystems that we can build around our therapies, yielding better outcomes, but also enabling us to differentiate from competitors. But the one I want to focus on, because it ties to what John was saying a minute ago, is around globalization. This was one that's on my radar quite a bit lately. If you think back in your memory, John showed a slide that showed China, India, and Indonesia as three of the largest growing opportunities internationally. Well, those are all three countries that are focusing on make local. For the last 10 years, China has been providing policy guidance and an advantage to local companies that has very much shaped the dynamics of, at least in the medtech industry, how you compete in that market. We tend to have multiple tiers of products, and we even have some local brands that we've established. India is now very serious about Make in India, and it is influencing your ability to get on tenders, especially those that are facilitated by government payers. Indonesia actually now also has a strong Made in Indonesia component if you want to be on a government supported tender. And this is a very interesting trend because it seems that the solution is obvious. Just go after local manufacturing, but that's at odds with economies of scale, where you tend to want to centralize manufacturing, where you have advantages and capabilities in country. So it is one that we're struggling with right now, trying to figure out what to treat also. I'll stop.
Sounds good, thank you. So next I'd like to introduce Sam Shu from Ecolab. Sam is the Executive Vice President of Strategic Planning for Ecolab. During his 27-year career at Ecolab, he had held leadership positions in global service business sector, digital transformation, international healthcare, treasury and corporate development, and focused specifically on Latin America and the Greater China regions. Sam has been recognized as a leader in sustainability, safety, public health, and corporate social responsibility. He has a bachelor's degree from the National Taiwan University and a master's degree in business administration from the Health School of Management at Northwestern. He also completed the leading global business executive program at Harvard. So, Sam, can you do the same thing? So let's talk your work at Ecolab.
Sure. So I think the lots of you probably familiar with Ecolab, but not everyone of you familiar with Ecolab. So because we're business to business, so let me just highlight that a little bit. What's Ecolab really all about? We care about people's life and then protect the vital resource while doing that, help the business customer to thrive. So that's our value proposition. That's our everyday things. So we serve the 3 million customer locations. So you think about it globally in 170 plus countries. So sizable business from the perspective. And if you think about Fortune 500, most of that really are the customers. So like the other two companies here are the customers. So from that perspective, think about the scale is really very large and how what we're doing. You could flip to the next page. The key component really how we drive the impact. So you never think about the Ecolab linking to the global electricity power generation, but actually we serve more than 22% worldwide. So if you think about the nuclear power generation, our numbers way much higher. So think about the food, the milk. Worldwide we serve more than 44%. So from that perspective, we really cover all different market segments from the perspective. So when you talk about a global mega trend, we start with people. So like increasing population will definitely consume more food, more water, more energy, more resources. So that's already have a certain gap today. If you think about water today, industrial segments really facing 40% gap challenges. And that gap will continue to widen from the perspective. So that's kind of components, this opportunity, how to drive the implications. But on top of that, while the population increasing, at the same time, the OECD countries, the birth rate drop. So because of that dropping, then we're facing the aging population challenges. We're going to have the more service need from the perspective. When you have economic expansion and on top of that, you don't really have enough of people supply for the labor for the service need, then you have the labor challenge, labor shortage. So that's another way to think about how can we do really solving that. The second thing is really the consumption behavior change. We have to change. Now think about, I talked about the gap on the food, energy, water, etc., etc. If we don't change our behavior, the gap will continue to widen and we are facing significant issues. And the resource really not abundant from a perspective. So we need to change the behavior, do the conservation, do things more efficiently, smartly, etc., drive toward outcome. The third thing is really the human being really are smart and then willing and then have a strong heart want to solve the biggest challenge and problem. So as a society, I think we all want to really leverage innovation, leverage technology adoption to make the changes. So with lots of technology we develop from the perspective, data really, really critical. Generally, AI, etc., automation really moving that significantly. So that's another the huge kind of mega trend in front of us, and every company really working on that. The number 4 really from the environment, so look at political environment, geopolitical market, etc. There are lots of kind of tension, conflict, or bipolarization, or regionalization, or protectionism. You can think about that. It's not like the smooth globalization market. It's all shift. So how to deal with the conflict kind of environment and then driving towards an outcome is kind of important. But beside that, definitely think about the extreme weathers, the environment situation changes, etc. So there are lots of kind of solution implications you drive forward to. Let me just name one more thing from the perspective. It's when the economic growth. So last time we talked about the inflation, the high interest rate driving the economic growth rate might not be as high as it used to be. So worldwide, really the forecasting the next few years will be lower than the average historical growth rate. So most companies really focus on how to really capture market drive forward to. Even think about to do differently and capture shares, otherwise it would be relevant from the perspective. So those are the key things really big.
Terrific. So those are the kind of broad overall mega trends that we're talking about. We wanted to kind of focus on a couple specific that John mentioned and that are critical to these organizations. So Cedric was going to start and talk about a little bit about supply chain management and how Cargill thinks about supply chain.
Yes, and this when we think about sustainability, one of the mega trends, and by the way, also this is something that is very, very important. Cargill started initially also as a supply chain company. Moving the core of the business is kind of moving grains from regions in the world with excess of grains to regions in the world with deficits. So maybe I more simplified is moving from North America, Brazil, South America, to the rest of the world, something also normal. But we see trends that came kind of much more recent. First is the world sustainability trends starting in Europe 2 years ago. And especially around kind of everything around no child labor, deforestation, starting with the global supply chain. So we were able also to trace the whole supply chain from starts to the ends. And in fact, we have 2 companies in the world being able to do this. It's Barry Callebaut and ourselves. And this is very helpful because we can now serve, I would say, our customers like Unilever, like Nestlé, for whom this is kind of traceability in the supply chain, also resilience is very important. We have trace it kind of expense. So we start kind of first on this. Now with sustainability and all the possibility that we see also the reduction of CO2 emission, because agriculture is also part of emission in the supply chain. It's important for us also to be able to trace where our grains are coming from which of the farms we work with, so that we can also help all those farmers. I would say we, as an example, we help them with regenerative farming, meaning that there is some ways so that you're using much less of CO2 each form. I would say when you're producing your food. So the supply chain, which was our core business, it's even coming, I would say, to today competitive advantage to mass with end-to-end traceability.
Great. So Brent, we wanted to talk also about technological innovations as a medtech company. Talk about that technology.
Yeah, I think I'll go back to something I alluded to in my first comment. So yeah, we see technology as a potential disruptor in our industries, and it's not traditionally we think of other companies coming in and disrupting existing space, but there's also opportunities for us to disrupt the spaces ourselves, especially as they mature. So the example I wanted to give on this was, our spine business was, it's a large multi-billion-dollar business, global business. Over time, the basis of competition was eroding. The market was maturing. There wasn't a lot of clinical or feature separation between some of the implants that various companies were providing. And as a result, first dozens, then hundreds of spine implant companies appeared. And you can see, you think about business, you can see how this plays out. You start chasing then a low-cost provider, a sort of industry, it becomes less attractive. What we were able to do on the basis of technological innovation is start to create a bulwark around our therapy. So we are taking robotics that link with procedure planning done digitally in advance that entire therapy and system is then connected to patient engagement through apps and other means to collect outcome and symptoms data that is then fed back into the procedure planning. We can combine that with video recording and analysis of the procedure as it's executed to improve workflow. And now you've got a barrier to competition. You've got a competitive advantage that is very difficult for a small company to replicate, right? And so these are the first sorts of things. In general, in medtech, I see this as the future where kind of reestablishing the right to win of sort of larger, more sophisticated companies as opposed to V2s is a trend we're seeing in multiple categories. But this is a way that you can think about leveraging technological megatrends as an advantage to revitalize your business as opposed to just sort of riding the wave to ensure riding that S curve. It's, if we go back to business school, it's getting that second S curve. So that's how we're doing.
Sam, okay, one more in a more specific area. How about environmental sustainability?
So when we talk about the sustainability, you probably heard lots and kind of talk about all the different kind of areas. But let me summarize in kind of 4 major trends from the perspective. Number 1, decarbonization. Number 2, electrification. Number 3, water stewardship and purification. Number 4, circularity and green product, green chemistry. So let me go slightly deeper on that. When you talk about decarbonization from the perspective, the basic concept really is that reduce, replacement, removal. Why to reduce? Reduce really the conservation, reduce the energy consumption from the perspective. So you will use that. But lots of industrial companies, when they think about they want to reduce, they come to energy first. But reality, when you have industrial operations, there's a huge water energy nexus. So solving the water heat chain efficiency, you address 20% of energy consumption rate. So that's kind of the reduced portion, really figure out where it would be the biggest opportunity, how to drive towards it. But then the replacement, really think about what will be renewable energy use, what will be alternative to use for that purpose. Right now, we are working with the other company together on driving the Minnesota Safe Harbor sustainable aviation field for the aviation industry from the perspective. It's kind of alternative, driving replacement and reduce the carbon emission from the perspective. Then the removal is also important because while you do reduce, you also need to work on the remove from what exists in the air. Right? So that's kind of decarbonization trend from the perspective. Electrification, as we talked about, there's a huge movement. So far right now, electricity roughly representing 20% global energy source. But by 2050, that number will move up to more than 50%. So what's the source of electricity production is very important. We're driving the outcome. So that's kind of component it goes through that kind of journey as well. So I think that EV is an example that will be driving huge adoption going forward. The water stewardship and purification, as we talk about, the industrial activity consumes lots of water, but there is a huge gap already exists. And then when you have extreme weather, that creates kind of a water stress, becoming a bigger issue from the perspective. So how to address that and then driving the stewardship purification, driving the recycle, reuse kind of components kind of important. The number 4 trend, circularity, there are lots of activity really moving from the perspective, from the reduce, reuse, manufacturing, recycling, and then regenerating coming back. But that's only addressing on the operations and foundation. The other part really on the consumer or consumption mindset behavior also can change. So the business model really need to create to enable that from perspective. So that's kind of a four high level on the four major trend on the sustainability side, when you can try.
We're just gonna have each of them talk a little bit about how they do business actions and think about kind of how they take action and organize as a corporation around megatrends. And we'll open it up to questions, because I'm sure there's lots of questions that have come to mind. So, Cedric, just really quick, talk about how you leverage data and analytics to look at trends. How do you analyze this?
Okay, so on the supply chain, so we're using data analytics, I would say, both the extreme short term, but also the very long term. In the short term, we are using advanced analytics and models to make trading decisions. Based on the better, on examining different countries where you have and it's helping on the central transportation system. So on the long term, it's proprietary also, but it's also helping us to make decisions also about where to place our assets. To know in which region of the world, which kind of grades produced, which kind of we have where the proper and then also using a lot of kind of methodological also pattern even in the long run. Also to really know about what are the opportunities for us, using this both for the long term but also for decisions.
Great. Brent, do you want to talk about that too? How do you remain agile in an environment? What do you monitor? How do you do that?
Yeah, so we try to leverage our strategic planning and enterprise risk management processes. Those of us who are in large corporations know that at its worst, strat planning is just a check the box PowerPoint exercise, but at its best, what we try to elicit from it is a multi-tiered look at what are some of the megatrends, how they're influencing our business, and how we should respond to them and change our investment. So we start with asking annually each of our businesses, each of our regions to roll up some of the major geographic, political, policy, and competitive trends they're seeing, and how it's influencing their outlook on the future, how they might respond to it. Beyond that, then at a central level, we know that there are certain trends that are going to have broad impact across our business. So we, in each strategic planning process, we highlight key topics that we want everyone to speak on. For example, a couple of years ago in China, volume-based procurement was rolling out, impacting basically the entire med device industry. We asked every business, how are you going to respond to that? And how should we think about your business too? We also asked them, with the advent of the power of microelectronics, how are you thinking about insight-driven care and leveraging data as a competitive differentiator, right? So then we get every business focused on it, and we can review trends across all of those. And then every few years, I would say that a responsible company will take a step back. They'll draw from outside the experts like John. They'll draw from data and analytical reports, and they'll think about what's the latest megatrends and what is our perception of those. And with that perception, how do we think about our portfolio? What parts fit? What parts have more opportunity? What parts may need to be managed differently or separated? And by doing that, you can have a virtuous cycle of top down, bottom up, where you're getting a pretty comprehensive view. Of course, the key is to translate them to action, right? Which is sort of you make your money, but that's part of the strategy planning process now.
And Sam, but you can cover that one. So what's best timing? How do you know when you see all these trends? When is it, as John was saying, when is it too early? When is it too late? How do you do that?
I think the key component really think about is a predictable, controllable. Those two dimensions kind of important. If you can predict, then really do the forecast and estimate what will be coming and what implication are you doing and driving forward to. And then if it's not predictable, you probably need to do the scenario planning from the perspective, see which scenario, what the outcome potentially could be, and then what action you need to do to drive forward to. But controllable versus non-controllable, you want to focus on the controllable items driving forward to. So throughout those kind of dimensions, you could really think about how to really make a difference and make the impact. But the other key component, really think about strategy, always a feedback, dynamic feedback loop. So you develop with all the process you drive toward to. You also need to really see the action and adjusting from the perspective. So don't wait until hey, I have a strategy, 2 years later, my performance bad. That's already too late. So you want really a dynamic feedback loop and make the adjustment functions.
Perfect. Great, well, you know, the mega trends affect all of us as consumers, policymakers, business people, so we wanted to make sure to engage the audience also and so that you have a chance to ask the panelists questions. So you each have a mic in front of you, and so if you raise hands, I can follow people, and you simply have to press the button, make sure your light turns green, and then the mic will be on for you. So any questions? Yeah, want to start?
Joel, there's a trend in the United States where policymakers, governments are increasing regulations as opposed to allowing business to do business, but increase the level of intervention the government has. Do you see that in your business as funds? Are you predicting that short term and how are you going to?
My business analysis is kind of really, this is kind of influencing for us, so it's constrained also business opportunities. So look at the Green Deal from the European Commission. So as from January 2025, a lot of products that related about deforestation will be able to be imported into the European Union. So this will maybe change some flows. You can see discussions that we have between Brazil and the United States, between Brazil and the European, which leads to the fact that the products are coming from deforestation regions in Brazil. This can also be a big administrative problem. So an administrative also costs to make business with you. So maybe, I do not know, you can have judgment in flows. Say flows going from the United States more to Europe instead of Brazil forward. It's one of the possibilities. So just to say, we're confronted with that all the time. So this has an impact on business. But it's also making for us opportunities. For example, the work by release in Europe that we started in the United States, now in California. It's because it was mandated by governments that we had this possibility. Now we are using kind of recycling waste to make energy. But this was only possible also because of this mandate of the governments. So I see this often also as an opportunity, and therefore also we have a strong program hand in hand government relations. We have teams and our teams that are working also closely connected to governments that we say from the United States, China, all regions of the world.
Understand any comments?
Yeah, I think as the simply highlights, regulation is also opportunity. So don't think about regulation as a new kind of constraint for you. Regulation is opportunity. On top of that, really is that regardless of which government you talk to, sometimes they have regulation, but on top of that, they also want to focus on what the people's well-being as well. So how to align to create that kind of common goal and try to forward to get that opportunity.
I'll just add in real quick that I'll point to Europe actually when you asked that question. The bright light is on Europe where for the last several years they've been rolling out new med device regulations that require pharmacological evidence, biocompatibility. It's quite expensive to adhere, which has required us to both invest and make trade-off decisions about our portfolio and which products we actually want to sell there. There's also pretty stringent rules on data hosting and privacy that influences the mega trend around digital health. There's also quite a move towards environmental and sustainability in products. If you look at the Nordic regions, we're already required to have pretty significant materials that you can provide that demonstrate your environmentally sound, or you can't get on tender. Which makes you rethink your business from product design, packaging interfaces with sterilization. Some sterilization modes aren't environmentally friendly. And then most of all, you have to have master data that actually captures all of that information. So we're finding Europe's still great. You still want to do business there, but it has gotten more complicated. I know you asked a question a little bit about the US, and that hasn't been as much an issue for us, but the privacy and device regulations in Europe are definitely complicated, and that's what you're
Great, sure, question?
And of course, the BRICS countries, impact on the US and what is not being thought about the US?
But the BRICS countries. So, let's say, because we are 25% of the global economy, quite often, all other countries, are being viewed as secondary to what we do in the United States. US has a very unique makeup. 70% of our GDP, 75% of our GDP almost, is domestic production and domestic consumption. Export account for a small fraction of what we do, and imports also small. Even though we have a trade deficit quite often, given the fact that we're a $25 trillion economy, it's quite small. The BRICS countries certainly have common needs. For instance, all of them are trying to move large number of lower class into the middle class, and therefore, to move people into the middle class, you need to give them jobs that improve their lives. To improve their lives and to give them jobs, you need to build factories. To build factories, you need energy. When you need energy, you look at the sources that you can find. Now, the bar is raised right now on COP28, the global conference on sustainability and sustainable development goals is going on in Dubai, in the Emirates. The bar has been raised as to how countries need to produce energy. When we were in our industrial revolution 150 years ago, we were a very dirty energy producer, but the atmosphere had the capacity to absorb. Today, the atmosphere doesn't have the capacity. So the countries that are growing in a way are asking for leniency from countries that are affluent and rich enough to be able to finance that green transition, like Europe, like the United States. I foresee a great deal of policy tensions between the emerging economies and the developed economies. On a GDP basis, we are almost at the same GDP level as China. But if you divide the GDP of a country by the population of the country, China is number 100, not number 1, because there's a lot of people in China that have to still join the rank of the middle class. And so many of these countries have great challenges ahead of them. And the question, I think, at a global level is how do you create a fair, just, and equitable transition for countries that are trying to pull people out of poverty and join the ranks of countries that are developing a good trajectory, and more of their people will be able to meet their basic human needs. I don't know that the answer is very clear. We have challenges at home, we have challenges abroad. When there's funding for these kinds of things from the United States, the question always is, we need better healthcare, we need better roads, we need better infrastructure. Why are we paying outside? And on this, we're able to understand how our fortunes are tied to the fortunes of those other countries in ways that are not explicitly obvious to the general population. I don't think you can convince the electorate and let go of the taxes they have to pay. So I don't have a clear answer for that, but I certainly do see that as a point of tension. And so therefore, these countries, for instance, limit market access to their populations, because that's what our product producing companies, that's where they want to go. And so they have levers that they can push to be able to influence the dialogue. But there's a great deal of tension as this seesaw goes down.
Good questions. Yeah.
What do we do?
Yeah, I'll take a start. So, Africa's an interesting question, right? Because it comes down to questions asked earlier about when you know what the right future is. Africa is for sure the future. It's got growing demographics, urbanizing, et cetera, et cetera. What's the right time to get involved? So there's that question that we have to address. Also, it's important that we understand that Africa is not one continuous thing, right? The discrepancies in wealth and political stability from country to country are massive. This is a favorite topic of mine. We're just finishing something that we call the Africa Initiative on my strategy team, looking at, all right, how do we invest in market development and helping build out infrastructure in a set of countries in Africa so that we can penetrate some of the largest cities, help build up that infrastructure, train and educate healthcare practitioners, and then use those cities as hubs to then move to the second tier cities around them. Use those countries as hubs that we can then go to the neighboring countries and sort of step by step build on our business again. So when we think as a publicly traded company, that's what we're doing right now. We are investing in accelerating market development in a couple of countries that are a little bit further along the journey, that are politically stable, that have good GDP per capita, and the governments have shown an interest in increasing the amount of healthcare spent. Now, on the flip side, we also have, you said stakeholders, right? We also have a mission, right? We have an obligation to provide healthcare to folks. It's the Medtronic Foundation that is also investing and is collaborating with governments in Africa to understand how we can provide services, products, education, et cetera, to help them along in a non-commercial capacity. So we separate the church and state very clearly in those regards, but in both senses, there's a great ability to have impact in Africa. We're piloting because we want to see how it goes and how momentum will build, but it is like the economic battleground of the future in some sense. I'm guessing Cardinal has interesting as well.
Yes, and I think, and I think we were coming to a very similar conclusion as you in the next edition. The question is also, it's really the question is when. The infrastructure, the political stability, freedom of flow, so the business so that we're working from this very close.
So one thing we did differently is that even every time the need is still the same. So we don't really just rely on us to be the solution for the market. We work with ecosystem. So for example, we sponsor license accelerator program. So accelerator program engage the startup, really solving those challenges for the local market from the perspective, which is the engaged ecosystem that you can drive the bigger impact in the much bigger way in the implementation.
One more question. Yeah.
Good evening. My name is Bill Gomez of Global Wellness Connections, and I was in the private sector for over 30 years. John did a great job of articulating some of our key megatrends that we're all concerned about. And certainly he talked about some of the gaps in supply chain that I think one little thing called the pandemic made very visual. One of them John referenced was that it is true, for over 20 years, a large amount of our palletized high-value product doesn't leave here on wide-body open-deck aircraft. It leaves here by a truck to places like Chicago, and then goes from there. Yes, small packaging internationally gets on FedEx and UPS, from the hubs gets sorted out. What's really important about this is I think it's something that's been a detriment to this market since Northwest got out of a large wide-body aircraft over 20 years ago. But it's taken us 20 years to address this point, and we're doing it right now in the form of public, private, and academic strategic thought leaders coming together. We've done it through a series of about 4 panels. Now, why is this important? The public and the academic sector have been at the table very strongly. And in fact, one of the key members of this from the Metropolitan Airports Commission is sitting across the aisle right here. The sector has been a little less involved. And I know this from my years in the private sector. We're very focused on day-to-day activities, rather than maybe being able to break out of that and get into helping support the strategy. Back to what John said, where the public side that are funding these kind of efforts to research and understand how can we be more competitive. So my question boils back to how do we, not even so much the senior leadership like yourself, and I can tell each of your companies have been quite involved in this, but how do we break maybe our middle, our director levels, our senior manager levels, get them to realize that their involvement in educating the public sector and even the academic sector is vital, I think, to our strategic future. Thank you.
Yeah, comments? Public-private cooperation. Sam, I don't.
Sure. So I think for us, we always be engaged with the outside from perspective. For example, we participate right now from reshaping the agenda and working on other direction really that too. If we have opportunity working with the community here, for example, we talked about it in Soda, in SAM, how kind of initiative we work with other company to get and drive forward to. The key component really is the what's really for the society. Do we have the common goal from the perspective able to align? And then do we have a really the value and strength to make the differences? If we have a chance, we're always willing to work with the others, the ecosystem with all different segments, with different government, really driving one outcome from the perspective.
Yeah, I don't have the answer. Comments, right? So I what I'm now you're saying, because I'm realizing, sitting here thinking, I'm realizing I didn't think about supply chain in my career until I became a general manager, and then 9 orders prevented me from hitting my numbers, right? And so earlier in my career, you just assumed that I got where it was going to go, right? And to your point, it's because you think about we're very specialized, right? There's a supply chain organization that does that. They take care of it. But now that we've had the supply chain disruption we had hurricane and ice storms in Texas, then the pandemic, right? It is obviously becoming, it is an enduring issue in our company. And so I think that's going to draw some attention, and it's getting more people at the junior levels. But in my experience, you need to learn by doing, right? And so if we can create opportunities where we invite not the EVP of supply chain to participate in an academic and public partnership, but invite the director level folks, right? And some more doers, I think you're going to find that will then propagate and grow over time. So it's in general.
Yeah, more education and development. How about
The supply chain was an interesting one, especially during the pandemic effects. We were thinking also that we will see some disruption. We didn't see any. We are also moving hand to hand our supply chain. Our barges, we will probably be producing 600 Panamax also across the oceans. We have rail system forms, so we have a part of that next. And we saw maybe the possibility for a disruption. It was in, if I remember, it was with palm oil production in Malaysia at the moment, where some of the truck drivers were scared to go through the border. But it was astonishing, I would say, especially for food. Food is very food safety is extremely important. One way to immediate access to animals. The only kind of congestion that we see now is in the Panama Canal because of the level of the water today. That we have much less of those Panamax that can go through. So they need to go through some of that, which is cool. But we are positively surprised.
Very good. Well, we will have lots of opportunity to still talk to the panelists if you want to stay for the networking event. So we're going to conclude the audience question and answer and give 3 things. If you could give a hand of applause.
And thank you to everyone. It strikes me, we talk about Minnesota, we have a lot of our work is bringing delegations here from all over the world, professional exchanges. We're one of the most sought after states people to come to, and part of the reason was just sitting up here in front of us. The fact that we have amazing companies, amazing skilled professionals, it's amazing organizations, people from all over the world want to come here, study, engage with us, and learn from us. We're really fortunate to have the presenters with us tonight. Huge thanks again to John for his program this evening, just tremendous. John and I presented together in DC. I got to be his moderator, a humble moderator to a wonderful presentation he did there. Very similar experience that we ended that program, the entire room put their hands up. And he had young people in particular, 5 to 6 deep afterwards, coming to ask him questions. So people are really interested, they're really engaged in this, they want to learn more about what's happening with these trends in the world, better understand the world around them. So big round of applause to John, and thank you. For the wonderful moderation job, Cedric, Brett, Sam, for the time that they've given us, and both in terms of being here tonight, but actually doing the prep and wrapping up this. You can understand that these are gentlemen that are very engaged in their companies, very doing very important work. They give some of their time to us. Part of what Global Minnesota tries to do is to give you access to people like this, to learn from them, to engage with them, and maybe they get a chance to learn a little bit from you too in the process as well. So the insights they provide, the access we provide to you is part of what we try to do for our business community as part of Global Minnesota. So a big round of applause to all of them together. You know, giving us this wonderful space to have a program in this evening. It's such a cool group to be part of. So we got to have this tonight. We have super thankful to them as well. We got to give a big bill of thanks to Steve Riedel for here. Steve had a very visionary idea to put this program together. He did a ton of work to organize this, to get together with John. The two of them in particular really put this together. But it was really Steve's vision that got us to where we are tonight. So a big round of applause. We're going to thank all of you. We have a little opportunity for you all tonight when you go out. I think we're going to try to do a little bit of structured, a little modestly structured networking experience for you. So there's going to be kind of a sustainable connect area. I think Sam's going to kind of anchor the sustainable connect area. If you look for Sam in and around him, this conversation around sustainability, they'll talk about other things too, if you want to approach him with a question, but we're going to have kind of, for those people particularly interested in that, we have a business response connect area that John's going to anchor, so kind of look for John for that, and a general strategic connect area that Brett's going to anchor. So as the rest of you can kind of filter into those areas in your conversations, we have some wonderful items. Don't forget your drinks. And the biggest thing to say right now is just thank you to all of you for giving your time tonight, coming and being part of the conversation. We really want to create places, spaces, and opportunities for long-form conversations on the important topics of our time. Did you find this to be a valuable experience tonight? I'm going to be part of that conversation. I think if there's anything else announcement-wise that you see at this point. Okay, well, brilliant. So thank you, everyone. Join us out here for drinks and for food, and continue the conversation alcohol. Thanks, everybody.